diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. Verse 35. Very early in the morning. Now note that Jesus has had a late evening. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else to the nearby villages so that I can preach there also. That is why I have come." So he traveled through Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and driving out demons. Lots of detail in that amazing little passage of Scripture. But the bit I want us to zero in on is this amazing statement, verse 35. Now, we get it, this is Jesus, but I think what's being described by Jesus is accessible to everybody in the room. Okay? Even if we don't do it exactly like Jesus, the stuff that Jesus is doing is very accessible to us. So we don't look at that and go, wow, I could never do that. This is something that could become an example and a model to us. And I love the language. So you get a lot of intentionality here. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up. We're not sure what time that was, but if it's pre-light, it could be as early as maybe 4 o'clock in the morning in the context of the Middle East. He left the house and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Now, on its own, that's a remarkable statement, but in its context, it's even more powerful. And I want you just to see this. One of our challenges in our world today is that there's lots of noise and lots of demands. All of us in this room are living in a demanding world, demanding our time, our energy, our emotion, our investment, a million things. So I'm just looking across this room, and I wouldn't have to be a prophet to work out that people have got a lot going on in their world. And of course, in terms of Jesus, Jesus also had a lot to contend with. So if we look at our little passage and we break it down, we see the demands of culture in this context. I don't know if you noticed it in verse 29. I love this language, that Jesus was in the synagogue. That he didn't miss that. He's attending synagogue because he's a Jewish person. And that's what you do. So there's a pressure of the culture that's happening there. And then look at this one. The demands of suffering all around him. He finds Simon's mother-in-law sick, and he actually goes to help her. We have the demands of need in verse 32 to 34. So because they hear that this woman gets healed, suddenly everyone's rapping at the door. And they're now crowding into the house of Simon Peter. Then we get the demand of urgency, verse 37. Did you notice it? That they interrupt Jesus, they come and get, we don't know how long Jesus was praying, and so they come and get him. And it says they found him, and they said, "Everyone's looking for you." That's a sense of urgency, the stuff that needs to be done, or the stuff that we think needs to be done. And then in this passage, we also have the demands of purpose. This is what I've come to do. Let's go to the villages and preach. So, one of the things that sometimes we do in a beautiful verse like this, verse 35, where Jesus goes off to pray, we sort of lift it up out of its context and just think about it. But keep it in its context. In its context, it's showing us that Jesus finds a moment to pray in the midst of a super demanding context. That's the idea I want you to think about. Now, the demands of your context might look a bit different from Jesus in Mark 1, all right? That's okay, so that's fine. But let's work with the principle that in the midst of demanding dynamics in your life, Jesus is teaching us it is still possible to make and find moments where we can meet with him if we want to. All right? And that's the key. If we want to. So when we lean into verse 35, it seems that Jesus wants to do this. He wants to be with the Father. He wants to talk to the Father. There's a yearning in his heart to hear and speak with his Father, even though everyone would understand him having an extra hour in bed that day, right? If Jesus had said to his disciples, boys, I need to chill out for a while. I mean, it's a long night last night. No one would have pushed back on that. We get that. Yet even though he's had, it seems, a long and demanding day, into the evening, there's still something within him that wants to meet with the Father. Okay? Now let me just pause before we say anything else. A life of prayer cannot be driven. It must be led. If you're getting up to pray because I tell you, that's going to last about a week. If I'm lucky. If I'm lucky, right? A life of prayer cannot be driven by guilt, but it must be led by love. And a life of prayer must not be rooted in something I have to do, but it must be liberated into something I want to do. Okay? Now I think that's what you see in Jesus. In getting up early in the morning, and don't get caught up at the minute with early in the morning, okay? But in being intentional about getting up and going, there's something in him that is leading him in that direction. This isn't guilt. This isn't have to. This isn't doing it because someone's told him to do it. This is coming out of something within him. He wants to be with the Father. This is an issue of love and relationship. And when that's at the heart, then we can make this work. Okay? Now, I've grown up in church. I became a Jesus follower at the age of 8. And I have experienced all sorts of weird and wonderful guilt and anxiety and pressure around things like prayer. When you pray, how long you pray for, how you pray, what sort of prayers you pray. I mean, all of this, these are all amazing conversations. But actually, at the heart of it all, whatever it ends up looking like for me and you in terms of prayer, it's got to be ultimately something that's coming from a heart of want. It's about love, not duty. Is that okay? Right? I mean, you know, I think moving from have to want to is one of the most important journeys you'll ever make with the Lord. Right? The Lord wants sons and daughters who want to, not slaves who have to. A slave has to, a son wants to. Are you with me? Does that make sense to you? Works have to, grace wants to. And it's a game-changing idea. And that's a sort of an internal belief system. That's not something that anyone can do for you. I can't make that happen for you. That's something that's in your inside engine room. It's the motivation of why we're doing it. And actually, when the why is want to, everything changes. It's still a challenge, still practically a challenge, still hard work, but it's hard work out of a want to, rather than harder work out of a have to. Are you with me? All right? But by the time I get home, I will have been on the road this week 7 days. And imagine I get home to my wife. We've been married almost 38 years. And I open up my arms to my wife, and my wife says, come on, then let's get this over with. Come on, let's. All right. This is my duty as a wife. Come to me, husband, right? Now, who knows? That's not what I want to hear. All right? I don't want to hear duty. I want to hear love and joy. Okay? And I think the heart of the Father is the same. And I think prayer benefits when we are motivated by something that's life-giving, when we're motivated by a desire of want rather than have to. Does that make sense to you? So everything I'm going to say to you, I want you to keep that in your framework. Because if you hear it from a have to, it becomes a legalistic duty. If you hear it from a want to, it becomes a practical opportunity. Is that okay? You with me? All right. Let's break it down a wee bit then. Because although it's wonderful to pray together, and that is absolutely amazing, we spend like most of our time in an average week away from the community. Isn't that right? So we're here on a Wednesday, you might be in a small group, there might be other things you're involved in, but you spend a lot of time away from this community. So actually, what we do when no one's around, or the disciplines we have when nobody's there to specifically help us, they're important for us, okay? So we want to try and develop this conversation. And one of the things that I want to encourage you today, through this example of Jesus to think about, is this idea of connected solitude. Now, it sounds very grand, and it sounds a little bit like, ooh, what is that? But actually, in a sense, it's a very simple idea. If we just think about solitude sort of as a single idea first, without the connected bit, here's a good working definition of solitude, what solitude is. It's the idea of being contentedly and constructively alone. Okay? Now, that alone can be for 5 minutes, or that alone could be for a morning, or for an hour. Okay? So there's no time span on the aloneness, but it's the fact that actually, as a follower of Jesus, there's a contentedness and the sense that this is a constructive experience, that I'm finding comfort to be on my own with Him. Alright, so it's not just solitude, that would be a definition of solitude, but connected solitude isn't just being contented and constructively alone, that's good, but alone with Him. Okay? So it's me and you thinking about prayer being a contented and constructive aloneness with Him. Whether I'm in my car driving to work, that's a moment of aloneness. Or walking my dog. Or if you've got a manic, busy household, it could be while you're in the shower for 10 minutes. Getting your head, giving your head a little bit of peace in the midst of the noise. Or it could be literally, you've got a place and a space in your world where you can go and be alone. There's lots of different ways that this can represent, but the idea is we're getting comfortable as followers of Jesus to be alone with Him. All right? And the more that we can develop that as a discipline in our lives, I think that is an enlarging and an enriching experience. Okay? Now, I think we live in a very busy and a very noisy world. We'll come back to that idea in a moment. And just being able to make the space and the time to be alone with Him is on itself a huge challenge for us. Okay? But this is something that Jesus is intentional about in the midst of His own demands and busyness. And I would argue that Mark chapter 1 isn't just a one-off idea. I think this is symptomatic of a pattern in the life of Jesus. This would be something that He would be doing consistently in His world. And I think you get a prayerfulness in the life of Jesus. And if that's true, then we're thinking about how we create a pattern or a discipline around a healthy aloneness with Him. Okay? Are you okay so far? Does that make sense to you? Now, before I develop this idea, let me just pause and make a really important distinction, because the word solitude can be confused with the word isolation. All right, now let me just lean into this. Stay with me now. There is a profound difference between solitude and isolation. And they sound similar, but they are very different ideas. What Jesus models is solitude, not isolation. Okay? Now stay with me. Let me break it down for you. Maybe if I break it down, it'll make a bit more sense in terms of prayer. Because this is prayer. If we move in the wrong direction, prayer can isolate us. And that's a bad thing. Whereas actually, prayer sometimes requires solitude, but we must resist isolation. That's why it's important, even in your own prayer life, you're connected to a Christian community. You're not just worshiping at home, you're worshiping with others. You're not just studying the Bible at home, you study it in community. You don't just pray at home, you pray in community. So this is an important sort of idea to recognize. And actually, if we were to put a definition of, say, connected solitude alongside a definition of isolation, then we see the dynamic difference. Our working definition for solitude is the capacity to be contentedly and constructively alone with Him. But a definition of isolation would be the practice of remaining apart. Now again, on the surface they can sound different, but they're actually moving in two different directions. And I would argue solitude with Him is a dynamic, healthy practice. Isolation from others is a dangerous practice. And if we don't handle that right, even something like prayer can lead you into isolation. So over the years I've seen people really bend out of shape on prayer because in terms of the prayerfulness of their life, they get a sense, okay, I've got a revelation from God about something. Because that revelation becomes so important to them, they isolate themselves from the people around them. Now, prayerfulness should never take you away from the Christian community. Because everything we do is connected to people. And this is important. Does that make sense to you? All right? Let me push it a wee bit in terms of unpacking the different trajectories, so how it might work. So, if we were to put this together, connected solitude moves towards something. So what's connected solitude moving towards? The presence of God. Towards Jesus. Towards intimacy with Him. So when I am practicing connected solitude, say on a Tuesday morning before I go to work, when I'm spending 10 or 15 minutes with Jesus, here's what I'm doing before I go to work. I am moving towards Him. Okay? And the reason I'm moving towards Him is because in a few moments I need to get in my car and go to my world. Right? So I'm moving towards something. This is what Jesus is doing. Look at what Jesus is doing. He's moving towards the Father, but then He moves back into His world. Alright? So you get that moving towards. Isolation, however, is about moving away from something. Moving away from people. Moving away from what's healthy and what's good in our lives. And we've got to watch that. So we're never just moving away, we're moving towards. So a life of prayer is never just about moving away from something. A life of prayer is about moving towards something. Are you with me? That sounds like I'm playing with words there. That's a powerful distinction. If I'm moving away, then I'm leaving something behind. Right? And I'm just wanting to get away from that. But if I'm moving towards, there's a sense in which I'm engaging with something. Not just leaving something. Alright? Hold that thought as we go to the second wee idea, which might help you. Connected solitude says, I need something. Or in this case, someone. I need someone. So here's Jesus, the Son of God in flesh, after a day of amazing miracles. What's He doing? By going to a place of solitude, connected solitude, what's He doing? He's saying, I need the Father. I need your help. I need something from Him. Okay? So it's expressing need. Whereas In my experience, isolation is the attitude that says, I don't need anything. And I certainly don't need it from you. And I don't need it from him or from her. Okay, isolation, really the dangerous part of it is I'm enough on my own. And that's a dangerous idea. Okay, and even a spiritual principle and practice like prayer can lead you to a place of, I'm all right on my own. Right? And I think that's a dangerous trajectory. Okay, still with me? Yeah. Here's the third wee idea. Connected solitude visits, whereas isolation resides. Now, here's what I mean by that. When Jesus gets up early in the morning and goes to that solitary place, it's always with the intent of returning. It's never with the idea of staying. Okay? There's a great little story, slight sideways example maybe, where Jesus goes up on a mountain, and we sometimes refer to this story as the transfiguration, where he goes up onto a mountain and he's transfigured, he's changed, and in fact the glory of God sort of shines through him in the most amazing way. And he meets with Moses, and he meets with Elijah. And of course, Peter is just blown away by this, as you would be. I mean, let's not give Peter too much of a hard time. It must have been an amazing experience. And Peter's blown away by this. And how does Peter react? Peter says, Lord, let's stay here. And we'll build 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. And Dr. Luke adds beautifully, he says, he did not know what he was saying. But we get it. I get Peter. You're up a mountain, and you're witnessing the glory of God. Why wouldn't you want to stay there? Right? But there's gorgeous echoes in the life of Moses. Moses went up a mountain and met with God, but God sent him back down. Elijah met God on the same mountain, but God sent him back. Right? Every time we meet God in a special place, it's never to stay in the place. It's so that we take him back to our world. It's so that we go back to our world, maybe with the glory of God or the presence of God or the word of God, whatever that is, and we go back to our world. And Jesus is modeling the exact same thing. Prayer is never about me moving away from something, getting into a sacred space and saying, I'm staying here. But prayer should always be about getting something in that sacred space and then going back to our world. Engaging with our world. Now, if you're in a prolonged season of prayer, maybe you've got a special retreat or you're doing in a special season, okay, we get that. But the ultimate trajectory is not away, but return. So, connected solitude visits the place. Jesus visits the solitary place with a view to going back to the busyness of his world. Isolation resides in that place. It wants to stay there, away from people. And actually the Lord's trajectory, though he loves it when we have communion with him, it's always with a view to empowering us to return. Does that make sense to you? Is that okay? All right, one last little thought, then we'll move on. I believe connected solitude leads us to life, where I think isolation is a symptom of death. So what we see Jesus practicing in Mark is not isolation. He's not isolating himself from the problems of his world. Rather, he's carving out connected solitude so that he can minister to his world. He's not getting away. He's going toward in order to return. I think that's in a church like ours, a church like Victory that's very focused on our world, I think that's a really important spiritual discipline. Yeah. Actually, if me and you are going to serve our world effectively, and the demands of our world, and the constant noise of our world, we need to be really intentional about thinking about how we carve out moments of connected solitude with Jesus, not so that we can stay there, although it's lovely there, and it can be great there, but so that we meet Jesus in order to go back. Let's go back to Peter on that mountain of transfiguration. He says, let's stay here. And Luke says he didn't know what he was saying. And then as he's speaking, it's really funny in the Gospel of Luke, as he's speaking, this cloud comes down and God literally interrupts him. The Lord almost cuts over Peter's words and speaks to him. And then he says this to Peter and James and John. He says, this is my son. I've chosen him. Listen to him. Right? And the cloud lifts. And in the very next scene it says this. They went back down the mountain toward the people. And right at the bottom of the mountain, right back in the valley of real life, there's a young boy, demon-possessed, that needs to be set free. Yeah. So they go from glory to the everyday challenge. Now, I think that's how it works. I think that's the general pattern. And if me and you are going to live in this valley of our world where we want to minister to broken people, then we need to be able to pull aside, move towards, in order to return. Is that helpful as just a thought process for you? Now I know I'm messing with words like isolation and solitude. For some of you, that might be really helpful, and some of you think, what is he talking about? But it's that sense of moving towards something in order to return, visiting but not residing. Is that okay? Does that make sense to you? And that's our everyday challenge, you see, right? So this is where I want to really make it practical now. Me and you are faced with the everyday challenge of living in this world. And if we live in this world only in our own strength, this world will wear us down. We actually need to find moments and spaces with Jesus. We need to do that. To feed our souls, to nurture our hearts, to give our minds rest from the madness, as well as find resolve and answers so that we can minister effectively in our world. And I've just found this, so let me just speak for myself, and I am just a normal follower of Jesus like you. People say very nice things about me, but listen, when you strip away the title and you strip away all the stuff, I'm just a follower of Jesus, right? I'm a son of God and a follower of Jesus. And every single day, I have the challenge of being surrounded by a world of need. And if I'm just driven by that world of need, and I'm not intentional about making room and time for Him, hopefully on a day-by-day basis, but even if that's a challenge, on a regular basis, I'm carving out time with Him. And we'll qualify time in a moment, what that looks like. I find that practice consistently empowers me to return. It empowers me to serve. It empowers me to give. It empowers me to go. Is that okay? Now, let me just say one last little thing before we dive into some practicality on this in terms of making a way for connected solitude. When it comes to our everyday prayer, there's sort of two elements to it. And I'm really simplifying this, so it's probably more complex than this, but this is the way I think about it. So I'm a pretty simple person, and this helps me. There are two sort of layers of prayer, as I understand it in my world. There is the prayerfulness that I practice virtually, can I say this carefully? All the time. So as I'm driving in the car up here, there's a prayerfulness. I'm just talking to Jesus. I'm not, don't overcook that. I'm not some sort of super spiritual freak that's always talking to Jesus. But there's a sense in which when I'm out for a walk, when I'm going for a run, when I'm hanging around, when I'm just doing ordinary things, there's a prayerfulness. Yes? We're just talking to Him, right? And I think that's a great thing to develop, and I would encourage that. I think that's what Paul's leaning into when he says, pray without ceasing. All right, because I'm thinking, what does that look like, praying without ceasing? I've got work to do. I've got stuff to do. I've got a family. I've got a job, right? I have to sleep, right? What do I do? I think it means their prayerfulness. And if you look at our Jewish origins, if you look at the Jewish roots that Christianity came out of, you get prayers that were developed for almost everything in life. Virtually everything, there's a prayer. Okay? They developed this idea of like a prayerfulness where we're engaging the presence of God in the everyday, the ebb and flow of your world. So as you're sitting at your desk at work, you could be working and prayerful. Yeah. All right? Yeah. When we're walking the dog, you could be walking the dog and prayerful. Yeah. Doesn't mean you're ignoring your world, but there's a prayerfulness. As you're sitting down for your dinner, there's a prayerfulness. When you get up in the morning, there's a prayerfulness. Every morning I've trained myself. I start off with a little confessional prayer. Literally did it this morning. The alarm went off at 5:30. I swing my legs out of bed and I pray this prayer. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has returned my soul to me. Thank you for another day. I start with a prayer, literally. And that sort of sets the tone for my life. Now, does that make sense to you? So I think there's a layer that me and you can just be a bit more conscious about and just be prayerful. Right? Just whisper prayers, speak prayers, silently or openly, depending on the context. Be prayerful. Bring the Lord. Be thankful. Be grateful. Be prayerful. Is that okay? And then there's a second layer where I'm not just doing ordinary everyday things, but I'm carving out what feels like a special moment for prayer. Now I'm using the word special really carefully. Really carefully. Alright? But what I'm doing is I'm making an intentional moment to focus. And it's almost as if, can I say this carefully? Me and Jesus are in the room together, talking. Alright? So, now please forgive me, if you're not married or you're not in a relationship, then this may be an awkward illustration. But it's a bit like me and Dawn. There's a level of our relationship where we just are together doing stuff. Right? Ordinary stuff. Not special stuff, just ordinary stuff. Like life stuff, cutting the grass stuff. Cooking together stuff, right? You're just doing the stuff of life, and you're together, and there's a sense in which you're engaging and talking, and there's a togetherness in the ordinary. Yeah. And then, which will happen this Monday night, there's the special stuff where you're out for dinner together, where you do something special together, where it's a carved out intentional moment together. Now, we're still together when we're like cutting the grass. Okay? Still communicating in the garden. But when you're together over dinner, it's a different type of conversation. It's a different focus. It's a different experience. Now, I want to encourage you, especially because I know there are very young followers of Jesus in the room. Some of our older followers of Jesus, like me, who've been Christians a million years, you may sort of be familiar with this conversation, but I think developing both. Develop a prayerfulness that's not casual, but it's a sense in which you're inviting Jesus into the ordinary ebb and flow of your world. Just whatever's going on, you're intentionally bringing him in to the flow of that. Amen? And then what we're going to talk about now, it's carving out those special moments. Wherever they are and however they are. And it's both and again. So just like we have corporate prayer and individual prayer is a both and. We have a general prayerfulness, which I encourage you to think about, help each other with. And then there are carved moments of prayer that are a bit different. Is that okay? Yeah. As a wee thought process. So let's remind ourselves of our verse, and then we'll just break this up and bring it in the land. You're doing great. Is that okay? We're okay so far? Right. So very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went to a solitary place where he prayed. So 4 practical little things that help me that might help you. Okay? And that's how we look at them. First of all, make a plan. So when it comes to these special carved out moments, make a plan. If you don't make a plan, it won't happen. I guarantee it. Now I know there are some people in the room who love plans. You have plans for plans. Alright? So I get you. I'm one of those people. I am capital C control freak. So I have lists for my lists. Right? So I love all that. And then there are some of you in the room, you're much more spontaneous and chilled and laid back. I get all of that too. But some things are so important in your life, they cannot be left to spontaneous. Now here's the beautiful thing about prayer. You can have both a plan and spontaneous. It's not one or the other again. But if you leave your prayer life just to spontaneous, the chances are it may be a little bit like erratic. It may be a bit gappy and spacey, and you can't remember the last time you really went for it in prayer. Okay? So what I love about this, the more intentional you are, the more spontaneous you can be. Alright? So the beauty of a plan is, I make a decision, whatever happens, I'm going to make, forgive my language, forgive this language, I'm going to make a date to meet Jesus at this time. Unless stars fall out of the sky, or there's an emergency, this is what's going to happen. Now that doesn't mean that's the only time I pray. I can have a spontaneous moment, and I can have my ordinary ebb and flow. But I'm making a decision. I want to be intentional. I'm making a plan. I'm making a plan. Okay? Now look at Jesus. This is not random. This is a plan. So I would put my mortgage on it if I was a betting man, that Jesus had already made the decision to get up early in the next morning, even though he had worked hard into the night. This is not an insomniac Jesus. Just couldn't sleep, boys, so I got up. No. The intention of the language is, while it's still dark, Jesus got up. This was something he intended to do. Now again, remember our intro conversation? This is not about have to. This is about want to. So if we keep the want to stuff in the heart, then this is about me going, I want to meet with Jesus. I've got a busy life. Kids, job, stuff, volunteerism, and a million other things in my world that's happening. All of that screaming for my attention, but I want to meet with Jesus. Now, one of the ways we fight the noise is that we make a date. We make a time. Now that time could be like Jesus, potentially, 4 o'clock in the morning. Who's up for it? Not very many, I wouldn't think so. Okay, 1 or 2 of us are early birds. But it doesn't have to be early in the morning. This is not a rule. This is a pattern. Jesus is not saying, and Mark's not saying, you have to do that. Now there's some advantages with early morning to set you up for the day, definitely. But don't get freaked out by early morning. As long as you are making a date, making a time, where you are going to say, this is what I'm going to do. A friend of mine, one of my best mates, a guy called John Benny, when he worked in the steel industry, he had to be up super early to get to work for his shift. And so what he did was, he made a 15-minute date with the Lord every day when he was at work in the toilet. So he would go into the cubicle, he would shut the door, and he would pray for 15 minutes in the loo. It's not a very sanctified place, but that bog became a holy place. All right? Okay? Now, the demands of his life meant if he was going to get up early in the morning, he literally was getting up at 4 o'clock. But for him, that was not easy, and that actually wasn't practical. So he came up with a plan. And the plan was 15 minutes, I'm going to devote those 15 minutes just to meet with Jesus. And I'm going to do it in a relatively secure place. All right, are you with me? Yeah. Now I know you know this, so please forgive me. I hope this is making sense to you, but if you don't plan, it won't happen. Yeah. All right? Again, this is not legalism. It's not duty. It's, is this important to you? If it is, make a plan. Now here's what I want to encourage you with. Even if you only make that plan, like hit that plan, half of the time, you've done it half of the time. Come on now. But if you don't make a plan, you probably rarely do it. But if you make the plan, the chances are you're going to hit that more than you done. Is that okay? Now, I don't want to talk too much about myself because I don't want to impose my way of doing life onto you. But let me just say this to encourage you. I have a plan where I try to have connected solitude time with Jesus every day. Now that's not easy, but I try to do that every day. And I would say this, now let me just encourage you, and I'm not a freak, I'm not a Superman, I'm just an ordinary human with stuff going on in my world, right? But I manage to do that probably 98% of the time. And it's not because I'm brilliant, it's because I've made a date. This is going to happen. Okay? And Jesus did that. He was the Son of God. He had a plan. Does that make sense to you? Just think about that. Think about the shape of your life, the rhythm of your life. Where would be a good time in the day where you could realistically, or with a little effort, maneuver your calendar so that you could make a plan to meet with him for 10, 15 minutes a day, just you and him in prayer. Okay? Yeah. For some of you that can be more. And for some of you it could be more than once a day. But it would be good if we could maybe make it once a day. Well, it would be pretty good. Okay? As a starting point. Secondly, look what Jesus does. He leaves the noise. And I note this, look at the language of the text. He left the house. So here's what he knows. He knows if I stay here, the noise that's going together will prevent me from meeting with my Father. Now, in the context of Jesus' life, the noise is a good thing. He's come to save the world, right? But if the noise dominates, he's never going to find the space. He's got to find a way to calm the noise or shut down the noise for a moment. And listen, the noise isn't always bad stuff. The noise can be good stuff. Right? So it's not just shutting out the bad noise, like sinful noise, but the noise we're calming is like legitimate noise. Everyday noise. The stuff we're supposed to be doing. But it's the noise of our world. And me and you live in the noisiest generation in the history of the world. And for some of you, for example, and please don't take this the wrong way, for some of us, getting away from the noise, for example, is learning to have 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes with Jesus without your phone. Right? Now, unless you've got notes on your phone that helping you to pray, you don't need your phone to pray. All right? Now listen, I've got a smartphone. I've got technology. I love all the technology. I'm not a flat earther. I'm not a weirdo. I don't live in a hole. I've got all this technology. So I'm not beating up on the technology at all. But here's what I've discovered. There's so many distracting noises. And even in our modern world, we're losing the art, can I say this carefully? We're losing the art of being bored. We're overstimulated and distracted. And one of the primary things in our lives, and this is not just a problem for a young person under 20, this is a problem for every human who's got access to a smartphone, for example, or the internet, is that we're being overstimulated. With just so much noise we're contending with. Okay? Now listen, the technology's brilliant. I use it for the glory of God. But that technology can also, and it has done, let me be really honest with you, that technology has interrupted my intimacy with God. Alright? So if me and you were having a coffee, and we're in the middle of a conversation, you get your phone out and start thumbing, I stop talking. I'm not competing with your phone. Right? Now, that's what can happen with Jesus. The noise gets in the way. For a couple of minutes, we're trying to shut the noise down. We're trying to be intentional about quietening the noise. Now, your noise and my noise will be different. But if we can quieten the noise, and remember, we're speaking about this special moment, not the everyday ebb and flow stuff, the prayerfulness, but the special moment, me and you are trying to shut that noise down so that we can train our hearts. Let me say that again, train our hearts to both speak and listen. Right? That doesn't come naturally. That's a trained idea. You can train yourself to be comfortable with no noise. You can do that. And it might need to start small, but you can do that. Is that okay? That makes sense? Thirdly, and this is a wee tricky one, find a space. Look at this. He leaves the house, and then it says, he went to a solitary place. Now, the word there used, solitary, is sometimes translated wilderness. It's the same word. But it doesn't mean like a desert place. It simply means, in its proper context, and certainly in this context, it means a place without people. That's the idea of solitary. So Jesus is doing two dynamic things here in this connected solitude moment. He's closing down or shutting down the noise, the demands of his world for a few moments. And then he's going somewhere away from people so that he can meet with the Father. Now, remember, praying together is brilliant. Praying in groups, brilliant. Praying as a corporate group, brilliant. But here's Jesus, and he's finding a place to pray on his own. Now, in this context, he has to literally go and find a space. Okay? And again, this is something I would ask you to think about as a possibility. In the world in which you live, is there a space in your home or a space in your world which could be connected to this idea? Okay? I have a little space in my home where when I enter that space, can I say this carefully, it feels a wee bit special. Alright? Now, you know, I love my home, but this little space is a place where I can go to reflect, meditate, pray. Okay? And it's a place in which actually going there helps me to concentrate. Now, you don't need a place like that, but the intentionality of moving to somewhere in your house or your work or wherever your world looks like, but moving to somewhere particularly and using that space to pray can do something to you in terms of your expectation and in terms of your engagement. When I was in Bible college, the Bible college that Clive and Becca went to, the walls were so thin, you would breathe and people next door could hear you breathing. All right, and doing other bodily functions as well. But we'll not go into that. All right, so it was very, very thin walls indeed. So what I discovered was close to the college, a couple of minutes walk, there was a beautiful little wood. that became my space. That wood became literally a holy of holies for me. Now, could Jesus meet me in my room? He could. The problem in my room was I had to pray so quietly and not disturb anybody that, let me be really honest with you, I fell asleep on more occasions praying than I stayed awake. That's the truth. And I knew that's not good. So here's what I did. I need to get out of this space to another space. Now, for some of us in the room, that isn't easily possible. But for others in the room, maybe more possible. But for everybody, I want you to think about it. Just think about it. You don't need a special place to pray. Of course you don't. And this isn't a special place. It's just a place without people. And if we can think about that, I think that can make a tremendous difference to us. So, plan. Jesus made a plan. Jesus turned down the noise or quietened the noise. And then Jesus went somewhere where he wouldn't be disturbed by people. But those are the ideas, okay, in our world. And what does all of that produce? Focus. So the outcome of all of those actions, all of that is to do this thing, where he prayed. So making that plan, leaving the noise, going to a place, wherever that was, is all to allow him to pray. So that he can pray in a focused way to the Father. So that for a few moments, and we don't know how long it was, we don't know how long Jesus was praying. It could have been for 10 minutes before he was disturbed, or it could have been for an hour, 2 hours, I don't know. No idea. But in the time he was alone, his focus was on the Father. Okay? So, it's thinking, connected solitude is all with the intention and idea of me being able to focus specifically on him. To talk to him, where possible, to receive from him, and to engage with him. And Jesus helps us with this. And if we're trying to develop connected solitude, and we don't know what to do, Jesus has actually helped us with some words. And Jesus said, when you pray, say, Father in heaven. So look at this. The focus is him. All right? So whatever we're asking for, and there's space to ask for stuff, actually, the focus is him. Yeah. And Jesus teaches us to pray by beginning with worship and adoration. Father in heaven. All right? Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. And then the second element of the prayer, let your kingdom come. Father, I want your kingdom and will to be done in my life. Right? So, Father, hallowed is your name, worship. Your kingdom come, your will be done. Let whatever you want to happen come into my world today, come into my world right now. We're doing that. And then we're given permission to ask for some stuff for ourselves. But we're asking actually for 4 things, or we're bringing 4 things before we get to ask for ourselves. Give us this thing, what I need. That's okay, you can do that. We can ask for forgiveness in the context of our prayer. And of course, we can ask that he helps us in areas of temptation and need as we go forward. And then, of course, it finishes as it started with praise and proclamation and worship. And brothers, can I just encourage you? I pray this prayer. The disciples said to Jesus, teach us to pray. And Jesus taught them that. That means that's a good prayer. Now, whether you pray that prayer as a whole prayer, like a prayer, or whether you use that prayer as a framework for other prayer, this brings focus to our world. So as we enter in to that space or place, it's about helping us to focus on Him. Open up our heart to Him. Open up ourselves to Him so that He is allowed to speak to us, minister to us, and help us. Does that make sense to you? So let me draw all this to a conclusion, and then we are done, and I will let you go. You've been amazingly patient tonight listening to me, right? There is a place for aloneness in prayer. And in fact, outside of the corporate gathering, me and you need to find a rhythm to this idea. So that in our relationship with Jesus, we are being intentional about meeting with Him. And Jesus models this. He makes a plan. He leaves the noise. He goes to a place. And He maintains the focus. And out of that practice, Jesus is able to return to His world, touch His world, and bring the glory of God to that world. Now, I maintain that me and you, we may not do it exactly like Jesus did it, but the principles within the Jesus pattern are all accessible to me and you. We can make a plan, whatever that is. We can identify the noise that we need to turn down, and for each of us, the noise will be different. We can find a space, a literal space, or somewhere we can go to meet with Him in the context of our world or our home, or maybe where we live. But it's all about creating the opportunity of focus on Him. It's about Him ultimately. And not because we have to, but because we want to. Not because of duty, but because of love. And I would argue that Jesus, His ministry in life is built on this pattern. And I want to be a follower of Jesus that embraces that pattern, that walks those ways so that I can maintain a sensitivity to Him, and so that I can continue to carry Him to my world. What is connected solitude? The capacity to be contentedly and constructively alone with Him. I think that's something even in the noisy, demanding 21st century world, each of us can train ourselves towards and learn to embrace with joy. Is that okay? All right, bless you. If you can stand with me, if you can stand. It's bang on 8:30. That was pretty good for me. I was very well behaved there, so thank you. And thank you for hanging around. I know you normally finish for 8:15, and everyone hung around. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I know some stuff there tonight, for some of you, will be a real sense, and other you going, I'm not quite sure what he was talking about there. I need to think that through. But what I want to encourage each of us with is that prayerfulness is not for the superstars. Prayerfulness is something for each of us. You can experience the joy of prayerfulness. It doesn't have to be a chore. It doesn't have to be a burden. It's not a duty. It's not a punishment. It's an opportunity for me and you to connect our hearts, our spirits to the living God. He wants to talk with you. He wants you to talk with Him. He loves it when me and you intentionally, deliberately move towards Him. When we literally readjust our world to make time for Him. He loves it. Now, He loves you anyway. He'll always love you no matter what. But He loves that mentality that moves towards Him. Because here's what He says. Let me encourage you with this final word. He says, if you will seek me, you will be found by me. I will allow myself to be found by you. Because He's looking for the seeking. Amen? Lord Jesus, thank you for this amazing example you've set us. The example of rising early in the morning, leaving the house, going to the solitary place, and praying. Thank you, Lord, for that incredible model and example. And Lord, I pray for my brothers and sisters tonight that we will be men and women just open to the glory of that idea. What a privilege it is that an ordinary broken human like me could literally step into the presence of God, be welcomed, and be permitted to speak to God. And an incredible idea that God would even speak back. Wow. And Lord, I pray that a fresh understanding and excitement of the joy and prospect of prayer will fill every heart in this room. Lord, I would imagine every person here wants to pray more. But Lord, I pray that there would be a desire within our hearts. That there would be an awakening in every one of us of a want to. An awakening, Lord, of a desire for you and a desire to be with you. And Lord, I pray that even across this beautiful community tonight, that Lord, there would be an opportunity for each of us to meet you in a place of connected solitude. Thank you for what you're doing in this church in prayer. Thank you for what has been brought already, an amazing teaching from amazing women of God and men of God. And we thank you for that. And Lord, we pray that you will build a prayerful community here in Victory. Both a community that learns to pray together and communities that enjoy the joy of praying alone with the Father. And so, Lord, I pray, guide us, help us, and lead us. And may our hearts be prayerfully positioned towards you always. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Bless you all.